China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Calls for a pragmatic relationship between the UK and China as the British Foreign Secretary visits Beijing, the first senior UK minister to do so in 5 years. Crowds take to the streets in Gabon as the military seizes power, the latest coup in a former French colony in Africa. 2 people are killed in the biggest Russian airstrike on Kyiv in months, while Moscow sees the largest assault on its own territory since the start of the conflict. And these are live pictures from Florida as Hurricane Idalia makes landfall as a life-threatening Category 3 storm. The UK wants a pragmatic relationship with China. That's according to British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly. He's on a trip seen by analysts as a potential icebreaker in China-UK relations and has met Chinese Vice President Han Zheng and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Cleverly's the first senior British minister to visit China in 5 years. Well, our correspondent Dong Shui is in Beijing, so tell us more about this meeting.
Well, Robert, as you mentioned, the Chinese senior diplomat Wang Yi has hosted the Secretary James Cleverly this afternoon in Beijing. Well, the talks between the two sides lasted about 4 hours, including a meeting over dinner. And in the opening remarks, both sides said that maintaining direct, open channels of communication is beneficial to both. And that's part of the reason why Foreign Secretary Cleverly is in China, despite backlashes from some politicians back home. Well, Wang Yi specifically mentioned a speech Cleverly made in April when the UK Foreign Secretary said that no major global problems can be solved without Beijing and that the UK must engage seriously with the country, warning that isolating China would be a betrayal of Britain's national interest and a willful misunderstanding of the 21st century world. And Wang Yi reiterated that China and the UK should work together in a changing geopolitical landscape, especially given the importance of the two in the global economy. And for his part, Cleverly said putting bilateral ties back on right track is essential for both. He recognized China's importance and influence in global affairs. And let's take a listen.
We constantly value the prominent status of the United Kingdom, remain dedicated to fostering a stable and mutually beneficial China-UK relationship, and believe that Sino-British cooperation holds global significance.
We are clear-eyed about the areas where we have fundamental disagreements with China, and I raise those issues when we meet. But I think it's important we also recognise that we have to have a pragmatic, sensible working relationship with China because of the issues that affect us all around the globe.
Well, engagement of this kind, I think, is a reminder that diplomacy remains an essential tool for conflict resolution, as well as for fostering a peaceful coexistence between nations such as China and the UK. And it's also it's also worth noting that the meeting follows the G20 summit in India soon, where global leaders said they would deepen communications. Cleverly's visit may not immediately warm the freeze in relations over the past few years, but it does open the doors for further communications. I know it's still too early to say, to tell whether the visit will produce any concrete agreements. But, as Cleverly said during the meeting, that he proposed cooperations in areas like artificial intelligence, digital economy would be the areas for China and the UK to continue cooperate in the years to come. Robin.
Dong Shui in Beijing, thank you very much. Well, Kerry Brown is director of Lao China Institute at King's College London. Paul Barber asked him what Cleverly's visit can do to improve ties between the two countries.
This is the first visit from Britain after its leaving the European Union in early 2020. And so it's quite important for Britain bilaterally to create a dialogue where it once did that mostly through the European Union on trade and investment issues. Britain's increased its trade with China and its investments a little bit over the last few years, but there still could be much more done in that area. Mr. Cleverly said this morning in an interview in Beijing that economics and security were the two priorities, but security would take the priority over economics. But I think it's impossible to separate them. Your economics is your security. Your security is dependent on your economics. And I think Britain has got potential to build more economic links with China. And this is obviously an opportunity to explore those and see what could be done in the future.
How do you think the dynamics between the UK and China have changed since that last visit, which was, of course, not that long after the so-called golden era between the two countries was hailed by President Xi and the former British Prime Minister David Cameron?
For sure. Britain and China are pragmatic with each other. I mean, they have been for many, many years. I mean, they have a relationship going back 450 years. So we know a lot about each other, and Britain and China, know how to talk to each other. And despite the fact that there are voices in Britain that are very harshly critical of Mr. Cleverly going, that's really a domestic matter, and I don't think these are realistic. Britain needs to have a dialogue with China. It needs to be pragmatic. It needs to be balanced. And I think this is an opportunity to do that.
Do you think the UK is recalibrating its approach towards China? And if so, what are the driving factors behind this?
Policy towards China has to be balanced with Britain's relations with the European Union, with the United States. It also has to take into account the situation with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, it's a geopolitical issue. And so that has to be constantly changed, and it's got to be nuanced. What we have in Britain, obviously, is a group of politicians who really are speaking more about Britain's domestic situation and wanting to use China as an issue to pursue their own kind of issues here. But it's not practical to say that we can disengage with China. We can't disengage with China any more than we can disengage with the United States or disengage with Europe. We have to have a relationship, and it's the kind of relationship we have and the priorities we give to it, and then China gives to it, and then areas of overlap. That's the most reasonable route forward.
The British Parliament has, for the first time, referred to Taiwan as an independent country in an official document, and this happened during the visit of James Cleverly. Does that send a strong signal?
But I mean, Britain doesn't recognise Taiwan as an independent country. I mean, it recognises the People's Republic of China, and it has a one-China policy. I mean, that's been the policy for a long time. The fact that parliamentarians sometimes don't understand that policy is neither here nor there. I mean, that is the British policy. There's a reference in a document this way. It's almost certainly, I mean, I can't imagine that being a change of policy. That's not possible. I mean, the policy is as it's set out, and that's the policy that Mr. Cleverly will be representing in Beijing, which is that there's one China and that Taiwan is a part of China, and that has been the policy for many decades.
The army in Gabon says it has seized power and overthrown President Ali Bongo Ondimba just minutes after his re-election was announced. Senior officers appeared on national television on Wednesday, saying they dissolved state institutions, closed the country's borders and annulled the presidential poll. Footage shows crowds celebrating in the capital Libreville and other cities as army vehicles drive past. It's the 8th coup in a former French colony in Africa in the past 3 years and will bring to an end a 56-year hold on power for President Bongo's family. Gabon's entire internet was switched off at the weekend ahead of the election. It's now been partially restored, but connections are unreliable. We can talk now on the telephone to Marlene Mbila, who's a journalist in the capital, Libreville. So, Marlene, tell us more about what's been happening in Gabon.
Well, hello, Robin. So here in Gabon, the situation is actually safe and calm. The people are still in the streets with the military force, but there are no shoots, no hurts. I mean, they are just walking and clapping for the military force.
So you say things now are safe and calm. I mean, this is a situation that's developed quite quickly, hasn't it? How did it all come to this?
Well, I think nobody saw that coming. I think that was the big surprise for everyone, specifically for the government. I mean, they did not see it coming. The population did not see it coming. No one saw it coming. And I have sources that they are saying that even the people, the guards of the government were implicated. So I think that this is a thing very organized. So maybe they were planning it for days, maybe weeks, but they know what they are doing.
And we've been looking at pictures of some people cheering on the streets. Would you say that this coup, let's call it, will be welcomed by people in Gabon?
Yes, definitely, because when we are talking with the population, I mean, it's the same message for everyone. They are calling it an act of freedom because, I mean, they were waiting for something to happen to push the Bongo family out of the picture. But since things are evolving very fastly, I mean, we are still watching and waiting.
So, as you say, things changing at the moment, a fast-moving situation. What do you think will happen next?
I think they have a list of people they want to get arrested. They already got some of them. I mean, they are the only source of the only official source now. So they gave some names of people they got arrested, and there are videos that they are circulating actually on some forums, some groups, some WhatsApp groups of other personalities that got arrested. So we don't know what they want. We don't know what the agenda is. So we are still waiting for the communication that will tell the people what's going to happen next.
Okay, Marlene Mbila in Libreville, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Russia has seen the biggest assault on its territory since the start of the conflict last year, with an airbase in the west of the country targeted by overnight bombing. Moscow has vowed that Ukraine will not go unpunished after a night of drone attacks by both sides that's left 2 people dead in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. Military chiefs say more than 20 Russian missiles were shot down over the city before they could land, with most of the damage caused by falling debris. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Dasha Chernysheва, who's in Moscow. Dasha, what's the Kremlin saying about these strikes both in Ukraine and across Russia?
Well, indeed, overnight we have seen a wave of the Ukrainian drone attacks against the Russian soil. Several Russian regions, including Pskov, Voronezh, Bryansk, Moscow region, have seen those attempts by the Ukrainian drones to hit the targets on the Russian territory. In Pskov region, the airfield has been hit by a Ukrainian drone, causing fire to several military transport Il-76 planes. We also have seen in Bryansk region that a building of the investigative committee has been hit, and in Moscow region, in the Ruza district, a drone has also fallen down in one of the villages. So certainly something that is very, very unusual because of the scale of the nature of these drone attacks against the Russian territory. But the Kremlin has said that the Russian president is updated about this ongoing situation very swiftly as it happens. We also have heard the Kremlin saying that the military experts in Russia are now studying the trajectory of those drones, particularly since Pskov region is bordering some of the Baltic states, and the that they will be drawing their conclusions after they have sufficient information. Also, the Russian Foreign Ministry's spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, has clearly said that these attacks will not go unanswered. She did not precise what sort of punishment Moscow will be thinking about, but before that we have seen Russia carrying out massive strikes of retaliation against the targets within Ukraine. She also has stressed that those attacks against the Russian territory do prove the terrorist nature of Kiev regime, as Moscow often describes the authorities in Kiev. And the Russian Ministry of Defense has also confirmed that overnight there has been a massive high-precision strike against the Ukrainian targets, destroying the military command post as well as the intelligence post of Ukraine.
Dasha, thank you very much. Our correspondent Dasha Chernysheva in Moscow. Clearing mines and detonating explosives that have been left behind after the fighting is one of several dangerous tasks expected of Ukraine's emergency services. Near the city of Kherson in southern Ukraine, which is still under fire from Russia, there are dedicated units of sappers. Our correspondent Yolo Abdavid joined them.
This farmer called the emergency team after finding a steel tube while ploughing his land. He tells one of the sappers roughly how big the ordnance is. The team leader goes to investigate.
The village nearby was occupied by Russian troops, and in this field we found lots of ammunition like rocket-propelled grenades, bullets, shells. And here in this field we found cluster shells from the Uragan multiple rocket launcher system.
It's not about to explode, and we're allowed to go nearer.
They've checked what's been left in the field here. It looks like a cluster bomb, a canister.
As soon as the explosive wiring has been connected, we stay out of sight with the team to watch the detonation. Just a few hundred meters away, there's another hazard. This time, several artillery shells.
It was a Russian position here, an artillery position. They found a pile of shells. They've inspected them, and now, just to be absolutely safe, they'll probably detonate them.
Some have live explosives inside. Other metal casings have rusted, but the decision once again is to blow them up. We're taken further back, some 300 meters away, to watch their controlled explosion. Up to 10 times a day, they're called to defuse or remove explosives.
Yes, the work is dangerous, but someone has to do it, and it just so happened that we do it, and we'll continue doing it for years. On May 6, one of our unit's 6 guys were killed while on a mission. Russian troops fired artillery at us, they attacked our team, and 6 people were killed.
While we watched the sappers at work, Ukrainian jets roared by. A reminder that the conflict in Kherson is never far away. Daily shelling makes most parts of the city too dangerous to live in, and even the local military administrator actively discourages people from returning.
Kherson is constantly under fire. People are killed, injured, and even when they go to hospital, missiles fly past them. Every day we have similar incidents, and we have to bury people. So, of course, it's not advisable for people to return.
It is ironic. After celebrating the withdrawal of Russian troops from the city last November, people face shelling and bombing each day. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN, Kherson, Ukraine.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Florida's Gulf Coast is battered by winds of more than 200 kilometers an hour as Hurricane Idalia makes landfall in the United States.
Roger, Ricky, loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome! We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Calls for a pragmatic relationship between the UK and China as the British Foreign Secretary visits Beijing, the first senior UK minister to do so in 5 years. Crowds take to the streets in Gabon as the military seizes power, the latest coup in a former French colony in Africa. And 2 people are killed in the biggest Russian airstrike on Kyiv in months, while Moscow sees the largest assault on its own territory since the start of the conflict. Hurricane Idalia has made landfall on Florida's coast as what's being called an extremely dangerous Category 3 storm. Millions of people have been evacuated from their homes or are sheltering inside them as the storm batters Florida's Gulf Coast, unleashing winds of over 200 kilometers an hour. Coastal flooding of up to almost 5 meters is forecast, and authorities are warning a life-threatening storm surge is possible.
Do not go outside in the midst of this storm. If it's calm where you are, it may be because you are in the eye of the storm, and those conditions will change very, very quickly. So wherever you are, hunker down and don't take anything for granted here. This is a very, very powerful storm.
Western Cuba has also been hit by high winds and heavy rains from Tropical Storm Idalia before it gained strength and headed north towards the Gulf of Mexico. Our correspondent Luis Chirino reports.
We are now in a point in the southern coast of Pinar del Rio, which is the westernmost province of Cuba, and particularly in a fishing community called La Coloma, which is located very close to where the Idalia passed as a tropical storm. And as it passed here overnight, it caused a lot of floodings, coastal floodings you can see in all this area, and it also damaged many homes that had already been repaired from the passage previous of Hurricane Ian last year. Many families from this community were evacuated to safe places ahead of the passage of the storm, as well as in the whole province of Pinar del Rio, which is quite large. About thousands of people and families were evacuated to safe places, particularly to places of neighbors and relatives. Some of the damage was also inflicted in the power grid. There are teams from other provinces helping out to put everything back on its feet again. Despite the damage inflicted here in Pinar del Rio and also in other parts of western Cuba by the storm, authorities say that the positive aspect of this storm was the rain it poured on all these areas, because it helped the reservoirs to increase the levels in this area of the island. Luis Chirino, CGTN, Pinar del Rio.
China has issued a yellow weather alert as Typhoon Solar moves northwest from Taiwan. Fujian and Guangdong provinces are bracing for heavy rain and strong winds. Another tropical storm, Haikui, is also expected to affect China's mainland coast. Fishing boats have been called back to ports in the southeast, and officials have told residents there to prepare for possible evacuation. Hundreds of firefighters are battling blazes near the Russian Black Sea town of Gelendzhik, one of the country's most popular resorts. The region's mayor says 118 hectares of land have been burnt. Forest fires are rare on Russia's humid Black Sea coast, but much of Europe has sweltered in a series of heat waves this summer, causing fires across the continent. It was the deadliest US wildfire in more than a century. Nearly 3 weeks ago, much of the historic town of Lahaina was burnt to ashes by fires on the island of Maui, and the destruction has gone deeper. Water pipes have been damaged, affecting communities further afield. Our correspondent Alistair Baverstock reports.
While Lahaina town in Hawaii may have been decimated by the deadly fires earlier this month, it's not the only place impacted. The August 8th wildfires didn't only devastate the town of Lahaina. Here in Kula, 40 kilometres away on the eastern side of Maui Island, neighbourhoods were devastated by the fires as residents evacuated. After fleeing, Sally Johnston watched her town burn through the night from the valley below.
It was a nightmare. It was sort of apocalyptic. It was just a wall of fire. So we assumed that it was gone.
When she returned the following morning, Sally found her house had survived, but another danger lurking.
We were soon told that we had no water that we could brush our teeth in, take a shower, and you can't boil it. Boiling it makes the contamination worse. They're carcinogens. The water looks fine. It's clear water. So, for a while, I didn't even know about it, and I was still doing everything.
The fires left pipes damaged, leading to a loss of water pressure that can allow bacteria and toxic chemicals into the water lines. Toxicity has contaminated the water supply, and residents are being warned not to use it for anything at all, even washing clothes. Shelby Schofield, who lives nearby, immediately noticed the difference.
I don't know if you can smell it, but we've been running the water for a long time this morning, so I don't know but this is the one that gives us the worst smell. It kind of smells like between gas and chlorine and I don't know what else. It's not something that I've experienced in my lifetime.
While most of Kula may have survived the fire itself, the long-term health impacts from residual toxins have the community concerned.
When you heat the water, there's that carcinogens in the, if you're near there, it's like you're inhaling cancer-causing stuff.
It's not like I want to die tomorrow, but I'm kind of not as concerned about me as I am about the younger people who may not have known, who may have taken showers and ingested some of the water. So that's a big challenge, and that's terrifying, really.
As Hawaii recovers from the wildfires, the longer-term health impact may take a lifetime. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Kula, Hawaii.
India's moon rover has made a discovery during its hunt for water on the lunar South Pole. The country's space agency says the presence of sulfur has been confirmed. Several other elements were detected, including aluminium, iron, calcium and silicon. Last week, India became the first country to land a craft near the largely unexplored South Pole and just the fourth to land on the moon. Now, it's once in a blue moon when an actual blue moon rises in the sky. And not just any blue moon, but a rare blue supermoon. The phenomenon will peak on Wednesday, though confusingly it appears more white than blue in colour. It's a combination of two events. A supermoon occurs when it's at the closest point to Earth in orbit, while a blue moon describes the second full moon in a calendar month. This particular lunar duo won't be seen again for 14 years. Our headlines again. Calls for a pragmatic relationship between the UK and China as the British Foreign Secretary visits Beijing, the first senior UK minister to do so in 5 years. Crowds take to the streets in Gabon as the military seizes power, the latest coup in a former French colony in Africa. And 2 people are killed in the biggest Russian airstrike on Kyiv in months, while Moscow sees the largest assault on its own territory since the start of the conflict. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.